Imagine you're a young kid with big dreams to be a singer, and at your very first audition to be part of a Catholic school choir, you're told by the choir director that your vibrato is too strong and you sound like a goat. Now, this is way before GOAT stood for greatest of all time. The choir director was actually referring to an animal. And I know when growing up, my family always discouraged me from singing. This is not a personal story. It actually happened to Shakira, who did eventually go on to become one of the world's most popular performers, even if her first two albums were utter flops in her own home country in Colombia. Her choir teacher refused to let her sing in the school choir, and her classmates all made fun of her voice. And in a way, it's like a story that we can all take to heart, because even the most accomplished, successful stars deal with rejection and criticism, all brought about because she was a local like them, and they were blinded by their own preferences over what they thought a good singer should sound like. Now, I know I used a very worldly example, but a certain sort of familiarity and expectations can creep in even with our relationship with God. We have a God who loves us, who cares for us, who does everything to pursue us, who can do great miracles in our life. This is great news. We shouldn't be just content to sit in these pews. Our hearts should be racing to be in the church with Jesus himself, who is in the tabernacle. But what happens instead? Things become routine. The same thing happens over and over again at Mass. We say the same words. We get down on our knees. We get up. Catholic calisthenics, try to get through a boring homily. Everything becomes familiar such that even the presence of our Almighty God become flesh found in the Eucharist becomes, been there, done that. Look at the people in today's gospel. They were Jesus' neighbors, people he grew up with, somebody they saw on a regular basis. However, when he started to preach, they questioned, where did this man get all of this? Don't we know his family members? We saw him when he was a little boy. What makes this Jesus so special? When we start to treat Jesus as someone that we have to visit, as somebody overly familiar, as someone we know all about, not someone we encounter anew each and every time, a great gift is lost. Great miracles are lost. Lives remain unchanged. We don't end up becoming the saints and the heroes of faith that this time especially needs, those prophetic voices that we are called to be. One of the saddest lines in today's gospel is when the people took offense to Jesus. He was not able to perform any mighty deed there, and he was amazed at their lack of faith. You see, it's not that Jesus is not God or not powerful. He is. But we get a glimpse of what can limit God himself. It's us. It's our over-familiarity with him. It's our lackadaisical attitude in his presence. It's a lack of faith in his power and who he is. It's taking him for granted. This is seen sometimes in the way that Jesus is treated in the Eucharist. Like his hometown citizens, we look upon Jesus and see somebody so normal that we forget the divine presence before us. We look at the ordinary elements which look like bread and wine, that we forget that we are before the Almighty God himself in the flesh. This weekend, Bishop Olmsted restored the beautiful obligation for all Catholics to return to Mass and Holy Days. And in a way, he is reminding us of the awesome gift that is the Eucharist, our spiritual life force, our food and nourishment, and especially the Eucharist as an irreplaceable and priceless treasure in our lives. But the sad fact is that recent polls show that nearly 70% of Catholics don't even believe the Eucharist is truly the body and blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. Many Catholics look at Mass as something to get over with. Hurry up, Father. Sometimes many Catholics believe that receiving communion is just another snack that we pop into our mouths, like any other normal food. And I was so moved a couple of weeks ago when I saw a 10-year-old boy come up to receive communion right here. He knelt down, folded his hands, and received Holy Communion on the tongue. And I knew immediately, in just how he received, that this boy was aware of whom he was receiving. And it's not just the externals either. Internally, people who don't take Jesus' presence for granted in the Eucharist also make sure that their souls are prepared to receive the King of Kings. They come to confession often, making sure that they do not receive when there is a grave or mortal sin on their hearts. They observe the hour fast before Holy Communion so that their bodies long for the eternal food that nourishes the soul. They practice works of charity. They love each other, not just in the pews, but outside in the world and their families, to strangers. Because when we start acting like this, when we don't take Jesus' presence for granted, that is when God works big things in our lives, and nothing becomes impossible. On this July 4th, Independence Day, I'm reminded of what happened with General Andrew Jackson's army and citizens during the Battle of New Orleans during the War of 1812. Jackson's army had 6,000 troops facing 15,000 British soldiers, and it was almost a battle that was lost before it had even begun. The citizens were afraid, but they knew the power of the Eucharist. They knew who was in their midst. So General Jackson and a group of the town's citizens and soldiers went to a nearby Ursuline convent of religious sisters the day before the big battle, and they asked that the sisters pray to Our Lady of Prompt Succor and the priests offer a mass the morning of the battle. On that very morning, the statue of our Blessed Mother stood so close to the window in the chapel that it rattled slightly as the cannons in the distance fired. And there, in the midst of war, heavenly reinforcements descended in sublime beauty as the Mass was being offered. At the time of Holy Communion, a messenger from General Jackson's army came in to inform the sisters that the Americans had won. The British, who had been counting on advancing under the cover of fog, were exposed when the mist unexpectedly lifted at the very moment that the priests lifted the host during the time of consecration. The British lost 2,000 soldiers that day, and the Americans lost 71. See what mighty deeds can be done when people place their faith and recognize the person of Jesus in their midst, when we don't take his presence for granted. As Americans, but first of all, as Catholics, because we always put our Catholic faith before any political party, even before any nationality and citizenship. May we remember today what will be the determining factor of whether this nation remains great. It won't be in how many resources or money or power or how woke we are. It will be in the fact that when Jesus is with us, will we put him first? Will we follow exactly everything that he preaches and teaches through the church? And will we recognize his great presence and not take him for granted? And ultimately, it will be when we truly appreciate Jesus' great love and awesome power, approaching him here in church, in the Eucharist, with utmost faith in his power to save.